Today's sponsor is Blue Chew, and they're giving you your first shipment totally free. All you have to do is pay $5 for shipping. Go to bluechew.com, use promo code DAVID. I've put the link right underneath this video. So quarantine fatigue is, it's a real thing. And when I talk about quarantine fatigue, I'm not talking about the furious gun-toting protesters that are demanding states be haphazardly opened back up, even when it's clear that states can't be opened back up. When I talk about quarantine fatigue like an adult, I'm talking to the other adults who have been doing what the public health officials are telling us we have to do, and who may be experiencing different types of quarantine fatigue. This can be psychological, this can be physical for people who are just around less and moving around less, and it can, of course, be economic, which we've been talking about as well. The people in the coronavirus is a hoax, this is government tyranny camp, they're living in another world. That's not who I'm trying to engage with here. But I do think that it's completely reasonable that by this point, if you're in one of the states that is 8 weeks into stay-at-home orders, even longer, or close to it in any case, there is significant fatigue that comes with self-isolation and the guidelines that we've been following. And I want to talk about a few different things. One is, of course, what we're doing is to flatten the curve, and we understand that. Nobody's questioning that piece, and that's why we're doing it. When we go out, we have to wear masks indoors and in places where you can't stay 6 feet away from people. You're not supposed to see friends and family that you don't live with. In many professions, you're either working from home, if you're lucky, or you could be laid off or even permanently fired. Your business may have closed for good. But people can only do it at 100% for so long. And the question is becoming, as people become more fatigued, what should be done? Clearly, flipping a switch and going back to the way things were would be a disaster. And we would undo a lot of the progress that we've actually made in the last 4, 6, 8, or even 9 weeks that this has been going on. But maintaining things exactly as they have been in the most closed states is starting to approach an expiration date. So what should be done? There's a really good piece in The Atlantic which explains, if you just insist on keeping everything as is, keeping the strictest quarantine, it's sort of like abstinence-only sex education, which we all know doesn't work. It's not realistic. It does not actually work. The more reasonable thing would be to be clear with people and have better, more detailed guidelines about what people can do. So let me talk about the all along stuff and then the moving forward. All along, it would have been better to get federal guidance on things that you should do. For example, go outside 15 minutes every day. A lot of people are not even stepping out of the door. Even if it's your front step or your building's roof or a backyard, depending whether you're urban, rural, whatever, just about everybody can step outside for 15 minutes. And every week we're learning more about the connection between vitamin D and coronavirus. We don't know that it's causal. We see a correlation right now, but it certainly won't help. It certainly won't hurt if everybody gets 15 minutes of sun every day. Total vitamin D would be up. Fewer people would be deficient. Mood improves with sunlight and outdoors, and risk is very low. If you can't step outside without being 6 feet away from people, then you got to wear a mask. Great. Would have been great to have clarity on that earlier. Most of the transmission is happening indoors between people living together. Then you have transmission at indoor workplaces and health facilities. Then you have transmission at indoor essential businesses, right? Like grocery stores, et cetera. Very far down is transmission from people outdoors. Of course, if people irresponsibly crowd together on a narrow hiking trail, it's bad. But the transmission happening outside from people passing each other on bikes, this type of stuff that's been spreading as if it's extremely dangerous, it's not zero, but it is extraordinarily low. And think of the good of people getting outside, getting sunshine, and hopefully doing some exercise, walking around, et cetera. Federal and state guidance on what are considered low risk versus high risk activities would be great. For example, and New York is now doing this, tennis versus basketball. I think I don't have to explain why there's a dramatic difference there. Also, harm reduction tactics for people who are determined that they are just going to do high risk activities. We are seeing that a lot of people just don't listen to the guidelines. In any other public health venue, we would provide harm reduction. If you are going to inject heroin, we at least want to make sure you have a clean needle so you're not spreading HIV. If you are going to be sexually active, we prefer you do it safely and give people access to contraceptives and sex education. If you are going to absolutely be doing an activity like this or that, here are the things you absolutely must do to reduce the risk. Now, moving forward, there are governors that are managing the psychological component of this better than others. I'll give you an example. Is New York ready to open? Of course not. The numbers are dramatically improved, but the answer is they're not ready yet. So what is Andrew Cuomo doing, the governor there? He announced three advancements, so to speak, yesterday. Number one, so this is all starting Friday. Landscaping and gardening businesses will be allowed to open. These are businesses where workers don't even have to interact with customers. It's outdoors. This makes sense. And it is businesses that get to open, some people that get to go to work. That's a good thing. Outdoor, low-risk recreational activities like tennis. Again, being able to play tennis outdoors, but not basketball, it makes sense. Everyone's really close together in basketball, not so in tennis. And Andrew Cuomo is going to open or allow to open drive-in movie theaters, which, of course, there aren't that many. I don't think there's any in New York City, but certainly a lot of New York State, most of New York State is relatively rural. And I don't know the number of drive-in theaters, but it's an activity and it is something that people can do. This is the type of thing that should be done now because it adds almost no risk, but it builds capital because people feel like something is going on. Now, it only works if people do the things they need to do when they are doing these different things. Charlie Baker here in Massachusetts yesterday announced that they're going to announce some first phase openings that could happen as soon as next week. I assume it will be very minor, low risk stuff. But again, the psychological benefit will be very big. Blue states are doing better at this than red states in total. Red states have been either doing the stay at home order where people are rebelling and it's imploding, or doing nothing and the virus is spreading like wildfire. There actually is a middle ground here. It involves very low risk activities, harm reduction, making people aware that there are things they could and even should be doing that are going to be good for their mental health and their physical health and get you more buy-in and allow people to behave safely for a longer period of time. Hopefully we'll see more governors do these types of things. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Tara Reade. Tara Reade is the woman who accused Joe Biden of sexual assault. Now, I'm not here to evaluate her claims, to play tit for tat, to debunk things. I'm getting a lot of emails from people saying, David, I need you to go through the evidence. Did she do it or didn't she? Did she do it? Meaning, did she file the complaint or didn't she file the complaint? Did Biden do it or did he not do it? I'm not able to do that, and nor do I think it's the appropriate thing to do. What I am here to tell you is from a political standpoint, in terms of figuring out what you're going to do in November, if you are someone who is debating what to do in November on the basis of the Tara Reade situation, there is never going to be a conclusive investigation that tells us what happened. Okay, you all need to understand this, and you're going to have to figure out what to do in November without a conclusion from an investigation. And the reason that it's not going to happen is that it essentially cannot happen given what we know. I'm going to explain what I mean in a moment. The reason this is important is that a lot of people who don't like Biden and don't like Trump are now taking advantage of the Tara Reade story to essentially not have to make a decision about whether voting for Biden is better than voting for Trump. People who clearly are on Biden's side on the issues, or closer to Biden's side than Trump's on the issues, are insisting that until they know the truth about what happened in the 1990s, until it's really investigated, they can't decide. It's time to skip to the end. Any investigation that takes place based on what's been made, what allegations have been made so far, would not tell you whether this did or did not happen. It wouldn't. This is not just about he said, she said, although it is. This is not about believe women or don't. As I've said before, making allegations is very serious. It exposes the victim to harassment and shame and the whole thing. It must be taken seriously when a victim makes an allegation. This is simply about, all that I'm talking about now is that there could not possibly be, based on everything we know right now, a conclusive investigation. There's a bigger topic as well, which is, can someone prove they did not commit a sexual assault when the allegations themselves are like the ones we have here? there's only a very narrow way that you could prove you did not commit a sexual assault. And that would be like, imagine that Tara Reade filed a complaint on a specific day and we saw, oh, the allegation is that this supposedly took place on this day. And then Biden's travel schedule from that time shows he was out of the country. Okay, maybe in that narrow scenario, you could conclude he didn't do it. But beyond that, you can't really prove you didn't commit sexual assault. And in this particular case, we can't even find the complaint. Biden said release certain records, but he hasn't said release others. Tara Reade doesn't have a copy of the complaint. She previously said the complaint was for sexual assault. Now she says the complaint she did file doesn't mention sexual assault, but it describes sexual harassment. But there's no copy of the complaint. So what I am telling you is not that she's telling the truth or that she's lying. We should take her allegations seriously, but there is not a complaint to investigate. Joe Biden cannot prove his innocence, nor is there any way to confirm Tara Reade's allegations. There couldn't be a conclusive investigation. Now, what about this idea that's floating around that she was fired because of the complaint that she filed? It's such a mess at this point that no investigation could conclude anything. She says she was fired for filing the complaint we can't find. There's a negative performance review on file whose timing can be used to call this into question. Well, what if you go and talk to witnesses? Well, Tara Reade says she approached 3 Biden aides about this back in the 90s. All 3 of those people told the New York Times they don't know anything about it. Could they have forgotten? Sure. Could they be lying? Sure. But the point is, it would be like the Kavanaugh investigation, where it is impossible to conclude this happened or this didn't happen. Given that, there is no way that an investigation would ever tell us Biden did it or Biden didn't do it. The message is you're going to have to decide whether you prefer Trump or Biden to be president. I think there are lots of people who would love a way out of voting for Joe Biden and would see Biden did it as a bailout, that they need to feel okay about taking an action that helps reelect Donald Trump. Listen, the DNC screwed itself. They selected a sexual assaulter. They lost my vote. But that investigation is not going to happen, and you're going to have to decide on the issues. Now, does any of this clear Biden? Of course not. There's almost no way Biden could be cleared. Again, if it was determined that on the day Tara Reade claims this happened, Biden was in China, that might clear him. But you'd still have people say, oh, I'm sure Tara Reade just doesn't remember the right date. If the investigation determined, as almost every single one of these do, that it cannot find evidence to confirm Tara Reade's story, nor can it find evidence to disprove Tara Reade's story, people will read that as whatever they want. Either it happened, but there's not enough evidence, maybe because the evidence was suppressed. People will come up with that. Or people will say, see, I told you there's no evidence that this thing happened. It doesn't matter in the end, because you are going to need to decide, given that there will never be such a conclusion, you will need to decide what is better for the country in November. I'm not going to evangelize my point of view. You all know the calculation I've made. You are going to have to make the same calculation without the benefit of a conclusive investigation, which there will never be. There may be an investigation. There is no way, given what we know, that it would be conclusive and give you the answer many of you are waiting for. If you disagree, let me know. I'm on Twitter at @DPacman.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This episode was sponsored by Blue Chew, giving my viewers their first shipment totally free when you go to bluechew.com and use promo code DAVID. It's just a reality that many men, regardless of age, can sometimes benefit from a boost in confidence, a little bit of performance help. Blue Chew is the first chewable tablet with the same FDA-approved ingredients as Viagra and Cialis. Blue Chew being a chewable tablet means it starts working twice as fast as a pill. It's prescribed online. You spend a couple minutes with a short questionnaire. A licensed doctor reviews the information, decides if a prescription is right for you. It's then shipped directly to your home in discreet packaging, no awkward visits to the doctor's office or pharmacy. Plus, it's also cheaper than getting it at a pharmacy. When you go to bluechew.com and use promo code DAVID, you will get your first shipment completely free. Just pay $5 shipping. That's promo code DAVID. to get your first shipment of Blue Chew completely free, and I've put the link right underneath this video.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new members of the day are Brian Lindbergh and Tom Kazarowski. Thanks to Brian and Tom, and also thanks to Gisette Terrell, who's today's longtime sustaining member of the day. Grab a membership, support the show at joinpakman.com. I'm going to come clean with you guys. I'm sick of being laughed at. Even though I didn't vote for the guy, I'm sick of being the laughing stock on this planet. The entire planet is laughing at us, making fun of us. We are the punchline of every global political joke because of Donald Trump. Now, his followers may not know or they may not care. Trump may keep telling himself and us that we are the envy of the world, including on our handling of coronavirus and testing and everything else. But it's not true. And I am really embarrassed by it because it's shameful to be this laughing stock. The whole world thinks we're a joke because Trump is a joke. Anne Applebaum writes that in China, the official Chinese news agency is pushing videos making fun of U.S. Claims by Donald Trump that it's only a flu, claims that are embarrassing to go back and look at today. That video has gone viral. In Indonesia, they wrote in disbelief about Trump proposes disinfectant injection and UV rays to treat COVID-19. In France, reports say the rantings of Dr. Trump, ridiculing him once again. In South Africa, an article promotes the horrors of U.S. President Donald Trump, leaving people stunned and confused with his bizarre suggestion that disinfectant and ultraviolet light could be used to treat the virus. In Peru, a newspaper article called attention to Dr. Deborah Birx's visibly pained expression as Trump wondered aloud about bleach injections to treat coronavirus. And meanwhile, as the world laughs, Trump insists everybody looks up to us. Everybody looks up to him on coronavirus and testing and everything we're doing. Here is Trump at a recent event making this case.
And we're going to do a job like nobody's seen before. And I spoke with Angela Merkel today. I spoke with Prime Minister Abe of Japan. I spoke with many of the leaders over the last 4 or 5 days. And so many of them, almost all of them, I would say all of them, not everybody want to admit it, but they all view us as the world leader. And they're following us. You look at what we've done with ventilators. We started.
This is one of two things. Either a clueless person saying something that they believe to be true, which is obviously not true, or it's gaslighting. It is making someone believe, it is making someone question the reality by telling them something that is completely disconnected from fact. If any of them are looking to us, if other countries are looking to the United States, it's to avoid doing what we did, because almost every country has handled coronavirus better than we have. Russia now is becoming a mess. It's a mess in Russia, and they are rapidly becoming one of the epicenters. Russia maybe handled this worse than the United States. We don't know yet. It's early. Brazil is becoming a major cesspool of coronavirus transmission. We know about Jair Bolsonaro's skeptical attitude towards the virus. India is increasingly a problem when it comes to the virus. We'll see if they are able to turn it around. But otherwise, everybody would be looking to us to not do what we've done. They're not impressed with us. We're not the leader here. They're laughing at us. Now, there's a new report which says it's actually worse than just laughter. Laughter would be one thing. There's a new report that says the world is actually despairing because countries that have become used to seeing the U.S. at the table figuring out solutions now are seeing the U.S. as completely useless because of Donald Trump. European critics say it's not just that Trump isn't helping like the United States normally does. Trump is eroding respect for the United States and getting in the way of global cooperation and solutions. This has real world implications, and I want to be clear about that. This is not a ha-ha Trump segment. Our global position is being destroyed by this man. Electing Trump in 2016 instantly called into question the U.S. as being a serious country. but maybe it was a mistake. If Trump is re-elected, it will cement the United States as a joke, and there's no other way to say it. If that happens, we are going to have to face the reality that American voters are as much of a problem as Trump himself and the people Trump hires. Now, we've suspected this for a while. We've talked about it for a while. But it will be the last confirmation. If we reelect Donald Trump, we will know that the disaster actually afflicts 60, maybe even 70 million people who may vote for Trump in November of 2020. The world is laughing. A lot of people actually take pleasure in that. Trumpists who don't care about our reputation around the world, or they simply tell themselves our reputation is great. But this is not good, and it must be stopped. Donald Trump abruptly rage quit his own press briefing yesterday after a historically embarrassing implosion, even by Trump's own standards. I've essentially stopped covering the press briefings and the roundtables and the propaganda events on the podcast and the broadcast show because they're just trash. I mean, they're simply disinformation. There's no news. They are worthless at communicating policy in any significant way. They've also been going on a lot less frequently ever since Trump wondered aloud about injecting bleach to treat coronavirus. But yesterday, Trump scheduled one, and it is really worth telling you what happened. I'm going to skip right to the questions part. The presentation I can sum up as we're the best on testing and the envy of the world. With that out of the way, let's get to the questions. We're going to start with the buildup about Obamagate. We'll go to the climax, where Trump tells an Asian reporter to ask China, and then the denouement, where Trump abruptly walks off, furious that a CNN reporter tried to ask a question. So we'll start with Philip Rucker. Philip is White House bureau chief at the Washington Post, also wrote a book that very much triggered Donald Trump called The Very Stable Genius. Rucker is really good at framing questions in a way that directly expose Trump's non-answers. Trump's been tweeting about so-called Obamagate. Trump tweeted it in all caps with no explanation over the weekend, also claiming that the Obama administration and Obama himself committed the biggest political crime in American history. Here is Philip Rucker expertly asking Trump, which crime did Barack Obama commit? What law did he break? Trump glitches, freezes, and simply repeats, Obamagate is the crime. Take a look.
Mr. President, in one of your Mother's Day tweets, you appear to accuse President Obama of the biggest political crime in American history by far. Those were your words. What crime exactly are you accusing President Obama of committing, and do you believe the Justice Department should prosecute him?
Obamagate. It's been going on for a long time. It's been going on from before I even got elected. And it's a disgrace that it happened. And if you look at what's gone on, and if you look at now all of this information that's being released, and from what I understand, that's only the beginning. Some terrible things happened, and it should never be allowed to happen in our country again.
Obamagate is the crime, my friends. Now, Philip Rucker tries to follow up, of course. Now, I looked at the U.S. Code of Law. I couldn't find Obamagate as a crime because it doesn't exist. Trump has no idea what he's talking about. Here's the follow-up from Philip Rucker.
And you'll be seeing what's going on over the coming weeks. But I wish you'd write honestly about it. But unfortunately, you choose not to do so. Yeah, John, please.
Crime. What is the crime exactly that you're accusing him of?
You know what the crime is. The crime is very obvious to everybody. All you have to do is read the newspapers, except yours. John, please.
Yeah, Mr. President.
This is a child, ladies and gentlemen. This is a child. So next, let's go to CBS News reporter Weijia Jiang, friend of the show. Also extremely proficient at getting Trump to blow his stack. She asks, why are you always bragging about testing? Like, why, whether it's true or not, why is this a competition when people are dying? People continue to die, and Trump doesn't like it. He flips out and says, why don't you go ask that question to China?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Said many times that the U.S. is doing far better than any other country when it comes to testing.
Yes.
Why does that matter? Why is this a global competition to you if every day Americans are still losing their lives and we're still seeing more cases every day?
Well, they're losing their lives everywhere in the world. And maybe that's a question you should ask China. Don't ask me, ask China that question, okay? When you ask them that question, you may get a very unusual answer. Yes, behind you, please.
So this already makes no sense before we even get to the Asian component of it. The question was, why is this a competition on testing while people die? And he says, go ask China. Ask them what? I don't hear the Chinese president saying we have the most and best tests or we've defeated the invisible scourge. But then it gets really wild when Weijia Jiang, who is Asian, says, why are you asking me to go talk to China? Why me?
Sir, why are you saying that to me specifically?
I'm telling you, I'm not saying it specifically to anybody. I'm saying it to anybody that would ask a nasty question like that.
That's not a nasty question.
Please go ahead.
Why does it matter?
Okay, anybody else?
So is this something about Weijia Jiang being Asian American? I don't know. With Trump, you never know. But it's all just wacky. It's cartoonish. It's a comedy of errors. And this really has Trump riled for the last bit of it. The last pillar of the three-headed monster for Trump, or the equivalent of Trump's kryptonite when being asked questions, is made up of Philip Rucker, Weijia Jiang, and lastly, CNN's Caitlin Collins. She gets up to ask a question. Trump called on her right before Weijia Jiang's follow-up. I guess she didn't react quickly enough by allowing Weijia to follow up. And Trump rage quits and walks out of the room, or back into the White House, better said.
Okay, anybody else? Please, go ahead in the back, please.
I have two questions.
No, it's okay.
But you pointed to me. I have two questions, Mr. President.
Next, please.
You called on me.
I did, and you didn't respond, and now I'm calling on
Sorry, I just
the young lady in the back, please.
I just wanted to let my colleague finish,
Okay.
but can I ask you
Ladies
a
and
question?
gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
I can't tell if at the end there you hear someone say, what the, or if that's something else. But what a moment. What an implosion. And this is why he's been cutting the briefings, because they're an increasingly embarrassing disaster. Imagine any other president, Republican or Democrat, rage quitting after acting this childishly. So the Weijia Jiang part, the Caitlin Collins part, these are more about Trump's wacky behavior. He's clearly very afraid of Caitlin Collins asking questions. Okay. The really crucial part here is Trump claiming Obama perpetrated a crime. Presidents accusing former presidents of crimes is a big deal. Being asked what crime was committed is logical, and being unable to say this is what the crime was is particularly problematic. Now, you may surmise that there's no evidence that Obama committed a crime that Donald Trump is trying to accuse him of. Trump is clearly desperate to take attention off of the virus and instead go after Obama for something, anything. And we've got to watch this very closely because we've seen Trump's Justice Department say they're not going to prosecute a guy who pleaded guilty, Michael Flynn. They are now emboldened and they're liable to really be out there with this Obama crime stuff. So we'll keep following it, including on our Instagram account. Make sure you are following The David Pakman Show on Instagram at David Pakman Show. And while you're there, with peace and love, follow me on Instagram as well. I am David.Pakman on Instagram.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on your support, and the easiest way is through membership, which includes the world-famous bonus show, as well as commercial-free audio and video streams of the show just for members. Sign up today at joinpakman.com. Coupon code saves you 40%. Vote soon 18.
Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome back to the program our old friend Bill Scher, contributing editor to Politico Magazine, contributor to RealClearPolitics, and an ardent follower of the ins and outs of election years in particular. Although you're not just an election year guy, you're in, year out. But things do get more interesting in election years.
I have many years, David.
Yes, of course. So, I mean, listen, to start with, what is the trajectory for the next 5.5 months? It's like, is this election going to happen in person? Is it going to be vote by mail? Will it depend on state by state? People are talking about Trump will try to delay it, but he will fail. I just have no idea how to even think of the next 5.5 months.
Well, I think he can't delay it. He doesn't have the power to delay it. Congress would never agree to delay it. That won't happen. To the extent we're voting by mail, probably going to be pretty patchwork, state by state. some states will do a better job and get ahead of the curve. Some states will drag their feet, and what that means at the end of the day is hard to project. And as far as to what extent this whole pandemic is going to matter, it's obviously a big wild card. But consider this: we are in May. We've already had in 2020 an impeachment, a ongoing pandemic and economic collapse, and a sexual assault allegation at the Democratic nominee presumptive, as well, not to mention, of course, the past allegations to the incumbent president. And the numbers haven't moved very much. Biden has had a fairly stable lead in the RealClearPolitics average, generally between 5 and 7. Now, just on this past Friday, it had ticked down to 4.4. That might be a little statistical noise. Or it could be, hey, 2 weeks of Tara Reade coverage has, brought him down a little bit. But you go back to the fall, to September of 2019, Biden has never been below 4 in his average lead in RCP. And that is different than Hillary Clinton. People keep saying, oh, Hillary was ahead in the polls, so is Biden. You can't trust that. And look, things can change. I'm not saying Biden's a lock, but their numbers are different. Hillary had dipped several times, going below 4 into a near tie or an actual tie, a couple of times even slightly behind between September 2015 and Election Day. And in May of 2016, she had a big dip. Some people were saying Biden was worse than Hillary in April. Yeah, Hillary was peaking in April. April was when seemed like she was putting Bernie away, and there was some buyer's remorse on Trump, and Cruz was winning some primaries. May was when Trump locked it down. Bernie's still dogging Hillary, and the FBI investigation on the email servers was really cranking up, and she went from around 9 points to a tie by the end of the month. Now she bounced back up. She was volatile. She was bouncing up and down, not like every week, but some. Biden has not done that much at all. He had a narrowing with Burisma at the turn of the year, which got him down to 4, moved back up into 5 and 7. Now he's a little closer to 4 as of today, but it's not like Tara Reade is becoming, omnipresent in the media, so I wouldn't think that would keep falling the way Hillary did with the email server investigation.
Yeah, I want to talk about the Tara Reade thing in a moment. Now, one of the things, in 2016, you hear this talking point, the polls were just wrong. Now, I think it's important when we look at that to say, in terms of the popular vote, the polls were essentially correct. Of course, we have an electoral college system, and you can find 3 states where about 75,000 votes push the electoral college over to Trump. That to me seems, I know there's these hypotheticals where you could win the electoral college with 27% of the popular vote. We've never seen that, and it would have to be a crazy situation. In practice, is 3 points of popular vote difference roughly the most that could still see the electoral college go the other way? And to put it a different way, if Biden wins the popular vote by 5, wouldn't it be incredibly, like 1 in a million, that he would lose the electoral college?
Some of our better data journalists, like Dave Wasserman, like Nate Cohn, earlier, if it was earlier this year or late last year, were making the case that Trump could win by 5 points. Trump could lose popular vote by 5 points or more.
Yes.
And still win the electoral college. There are ways that can happen based on how the demographics play out. However, those projections were made before we saw Biden's demographics. Biden's demographics are not Hillary's demographics. Biden does better, much better with seniors than Hillary did and Obama did. You look at Hillary and Obama's numbers generationally, it's a diagonal line downward. The older you get, the less Democratic you are. Biden's kind of a V. Biden gets kind of soft around middle age, around Gen X and early boomers, and then he comes back up with 65 and over. And so that may make a difference in states with senior populations like Florida, like Arizona. So, and what we see today, at least, when we see Biden, around 4 to 7 in most polls. Monmouth was 9. That was kind of high end. CNBC was 3. There was one tie, which was the Investors Business Daily, but generally 5 to 7. State polls in this same period, very good for Biden. Winning in Florida, winning in Arizona, winning in the industrial Midwest. There's even one where he was even up in Texas, so another one was a tie.
Yeah.
So it's not a lock. These are not like massive leads that can't evaporate based on circumstances in the future, but you are seeing Biden doing well in the swing states while winning in the popular vote by around 5 or so.
So, Tara Reade, my sense of this situation is there cannot possibly be what we would call a conclusive investigation into the allegations. I'm going to talk more about this on the program tomorrow, but to not do my segment tomorrow now, the gist of it is you've got a he said, she said situation. The complaint that Tara Reade says she filed but doesn't mention sexual assault, she doesn't have a copy of, and it's not clear what the date is. So I guess what I'm saying is, without criticizing or even evaluating the truth of the claims, there's not enough to conclusively determine what happened, and thus something. I don't know what that something is. I just think there's a lot of people wanting something conclusive, which they're never going to get. What's your sense of it?
Well, I won't put myself in the position of being the adjudicator of what's true and what's not true.
Of course, right. That's the thing. I don't think we're going to be able to.
Let me just try to talk about this in the terms of, I think, the reaction amongst Democrats,
yes,
and the reaction in the media.
Okay.
Biden gave a response a week plus ago that went over well with elected Democrats. You did not see any elected Democrats criticize him. You didn't see anyone say, take me out of the running for VP. You didn't see the endorsements stop coming. You saw Democrats repeat his messages. He gave a statement which other Democrats felt comfortable echoing. And Democrats don't always do that. So
right.
that's a significant thing. So number one, he kept his party in line with that. Number two, I think Tara Reade has made some PR mistakes. Again, this is not a bear on whether it's true or not.
Right.
You can be telling the truth and make PR mistakes. But I think it was a mistake to not respond to Biden quickly. She canceled on Fox, she canceled on CNN. So that created like a 3-4 day period where some media coverage were poking holes in the story and she wasn't responding. And even though this might have gotten wide pickup, the Vox recounting of what Tara Reade said, there are actually two. There was an AP story and a Vox story that got into what she said in 2019 to reporters that wasn't published at the time, and contrasting that with what was said today, and not just her, but also one of her anonymous corroborators. And the 2019 substance and tone was not sexual. What I wasn't scared by him. He wasn't going to take me in a room. Wasn't that kind of vibe. The friend said that he never kissed her. It just has a totally different tone and context to what was being said today. And clearly that's had resonance in media circles as well as Democratic circles, where they're not as inclined to take what Tara Reade is saying at straight face value without adding in these mitigating elements. So when she finally does Megyn Kelly, a decision to do a kind of a big name, but not on a TV platform, on an online platform, you didn't see, like if she did a CNN exclusive, that gets looped on CNN all day long.
Yep.
Whatever you think of the veracity of it, it's going to get repeated and repeated and repeated. You debate it, you discuss it. That didn't happen with Megyn Kelly. So all the stuff about Biden's side of the story and the questions of Tara Reade's story, that had time to settle. And that did not get reversed by the Megyn Kelly interview.
Is your sense that in 6 weeks, this will be a bigger part of the race or a smaller part of the race?
It's going to be, I think, largely a non-factor unless another shoe drops. I mean,
right.
who could have known that she had a neighbor that she spoke to in 1996, come out of nowhere? Something like that happens. Sure, things could change. But of course, someone accuses him of making a verbal sexual harassment to a 14-year-old, and it's debunked in 24 hours. So what comes out of the woodwork and does it hold up to scrutiny? Those are things that are going to matter whether this keeps going. Now, I could see, regardless of what happens going forward, Donald Trump doing social media stuff, targeting younger people, targeting women, trying to plant seeds of doubt, semi under the radar, and see if you can hurt Biden on the margins. He did that stuff with Hillary, very successfully, but that was a close race. That stuff works in a close race. If it's not a close race, I don't think that stuff matters.
So before the pandemic really got going, I had kind of a sense that in large part, November would be a lot about the perception of the state of the economy. That's not any particularly unique insight. It would just be that as it often is. And that's what made me think that, polling aside, it was going to be very, very difficult to remove Donald Trump in November. With the completely failed handling of the pandemic, I started to think maybe this is going to affect the trajectory. Now, political scientist Rachel Bitecofer a couple of weeks ago said she doesn't really think that that's going to make a difference. And I want to try to parse through the idea of maybe the handling of the pandemic itself is baked in the sense that Trump's followers think he's doing fine with it, and a whole bunch of other people don't believe that he's handled it well, but that's not necessarily going to change too many votes. But isn't that directly linked to the economy at this point, in the sense that isn't the perception of the economy in October and November going to relate directly to what happens with the virus?
Sure. I like Rachel Bitecofer a lot. She's been a source of my pieces. I think she's great. I generally agree in a more of a political science view than perhaps a campaign operative view. A political science view is generally look at the fundamentals. The stuff that campaigns do tends to not have that much of an impact at the end of the day, at best on the margins. I generally subscribe to that. But this is a bit of uncharted territory. For example, a political scientist might say second quarter GDP is highly determinative of the outcome. If you're on the rise, people feel good about the economy. GDP numbers tend to kind of filter through over time. So how it feels on the ground, you don't feel it right away. So what happens in the second quarter, you'll feel by election day. And that's why that tends to have a correlation. And so if you're on a downward trend in the second quarter, even if things are statistically picking up by November, you don't feel it yet, like George Bush in 1992. And so that doesn't help you.
Let me explore that just briefly, because the timing, so people understand. Second quarter is April, May, June. It typically takes about 35 days to get the numbers. So we would know around August 5th or 10th, I think, what the second quarter GDP numbers were. If they are indeed minus 20, as some are predicting, you're talking about a period starting in mid-August, which is actually much closer to the election than the second quarter itself.
Right. It would seem highly likely that second quarter GDP will be disastrous.
Yeah.
And so you might punch that into a model and say it's a done deal. Where I would pause is say this is a little different than your usual recession or depression.
Yes.
Maybe the virus lifts by September and people start shopping more robustly in October. And even though the statistics haven't caught up to that, you're feeling better and your opinion of Trump is better. Now, I'm not saying I think that's a high probability scenario. I think it's much more likely this virus doesn't go away at all and we're still stuck in our homes for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that I can't say with certainty. The bottom line is, do you feel we're getting better or we're getting worse? And I'm not sure we can use current numbers to know that, because this is such a highly unusual situation.
Yeah, my message to my audience has simply been, I don't care what state you vote in. I don't care what the polls say. I don't care what the past tells us about what happens when the economy is bad, improving, whatever. We just really don't know. And if you care about removing Donald Trump, just make sure that you vote and get 10 other people to vote, however you can do it, because it's just so unpredictable.
Well, that's right. Now, And anytime an election is going to be close, that kind of GOTV can really matter.
Right.
If Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, they came down to a handful of votes. One campaign is doing a little bit better than the other.
Yep.
That changes the whole election. Now, if we're in a situation where the country has really decided this Trump thing did not work, that was a bad idea. It has failed in a multitude of ways, and Biden's up by 7 points or whatever. Getting 5 more of your friends doesn't matter. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm not saying you should take a nap on election day, but I think Super Tuesday is relevant here. I mean, and I talked about this in a Politico article today. Super Tuesday was this fantastic real-time poli-sci experiment. What's more important? Is it paid media? Who owns the airwaves? Is it ground game, which is often fueled by a lot of online organizing these days? Or is it free media? Michael Bloomberg owned pay media. He just crushed paid media up and down. He flooded the airwaves. Bernie had the ground game. He had the online. He had the door knocking. He had the small donor army. He had all that stuff. Biden was broke. Biden had no field offices. There were states he didn't even visit. But his free media from Saturday to Tuesday was as golden as it's ever been. And it wasn't just that it was good. It was communicating a message that Democrats wanted to hear. Who is electable, who's going to govern in a sound and sane way, who's going to unify the party. That all came together in that 72-hour period, and he won going away.
With some endorsements in that period as well.
But it's not like Pete Buttigieg. I mean, most endorsements don't matter.
Right.
Al Gore did not save Howard Dean.
Correct.
The endorsements communicated a message.
Yeah, it was a very narrow scenario where they actually made a difference.
Yes, because it's not like Pete Buttigieg had that many votes to give, or Klobuchar had that many votes to give, or Beto O'Rourke had that many votes to give. But there were people from different slices of the party, although generally on the moderate side of things, saying, "Hey, if you're not on for revolution, if you want a more moderate, pragmatic choice who can unify the party of the country, you have one option, and it's not Michael Bloomberg, it's not me, Pete, it's not me, Amy, it's this guy." And there were enough Democrats who liked that message to consolidate around him without the benefit of a strong campaign apparatus. So if the message in November is Trump is doing a terrible job and Biden is a sane, competent alternative, you're not going to need massive digital operations or fantastic advertising to win the election. It's just going to be baked in the fundamental dynamics of the electorate.
Bill Scher, contributing editor to Politico Magazine, contributor to RealClearPolitics. We'll link to his latest article that he referred to. Bill, always a pleasure having you on.
Good to talk to you as well. Take care.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
The David Pakman Show depends on the support of our viewers and listeners, and one way to keep us going is through Patreon, where you can pledge as little as $1 per month or as much as you want at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Great perks and benefits as well. Read about them.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I've got a great little lesson for all of you today in historical revisionism and gaslighting put together. You might be familiar with Kayleigh McEnany. She's Donald Trump's latest press secretary. She has done a few press briefings lying regularly for Donald Trump. She says that Trump is the best president ever. She justifies anything he does and says. She's the epitome of a true brown-nosing sycophant. But she was not always like this as far as Trump is concerned, because back during the 2016 Republican primary, she said Trump is hateful and says racist things. We have the video. Let's take a look at it.
How sick of polls are people in New Hampshire right now?
Probably very sick, especially when they see that Donald Trump is number 2 and doesn't deserve to be there. The GOP doesn't need to be turning away voters and isolating them. We need to be bringing them into the tent. Donald Trump is the last person who's going to do that.
Kayleigh, this is your guy. He's number 2 in the polls.
Hey, I don't want to claim this guy. The fact that the Republican Party is now having to claim him is both unfortunate and, to me, inauthentic. What's the expiration date then on a racist statement? To me, a racist statement's a racist statement. I don't like what Donald Trump said. I don't like what Al Sharpton says. And at what point does it expire and become something that's in the past?
Trump is racist. Trump is hateful. She doesn't like it. She doesn't like him. Now, here's the real payoff. Kayleigh was asked about these past statements by reporter Yamiche Alcindor during a recent press briefing, and her answer is the epitome of an Orwellian look the other way sort of answer. She says, you know, I mistakenly thought Trump was racist because I was reading CNN headlines at the time. This is her explanation. Take a look at it.
The question I have is, in 2015, shortly after the president said that some Mexican immigrants were rapists and criminals, you said that that language was racist and hateful. Do you still believe that today?
Well, I'm actually glad you asked that, because for about the first 4 weeks of the election, I was watching CNN and I was naively believing some of the headlines that I saw on CNN. And
reading headlines, that's fine. I just want to know if you also personally still believe that.
I'm actually not going to read the headlines. So I very quickly came around and supported the president. In fact, CNN hired me. I was on many 8-on-1 panels where I proudly supported this president, who I believe is one of the best presidents, if not the best president this country will ever have. But I would encourage the individual who did that analysis of my past, rather than focusing on me, he really should be focused on some of the very guests CNN chose to have on their network. He should be focused on, over here, Jim Clapper, who said, 10 days before he privately told investigators there was no evidence of collusion.
Okay, so her notes for this question include attacks on CNN guests, and we can stop it right there. Her argument is, when I said what I said about Donald Trump, when I said he was a hateful racist and all that stuff, I was wrong because I fell for CNN headlines. I no longer fall for CNN headlines like I did back then. How easy to trick her, though, right? Can she really be trusted if she so easily fell for supposedly fake headlines from CNN? And do we trust her judgment if she took a job with CNN, as she says, despite believing that they are fake news? Now, I really need you to understand something. Trumpists see that and they think it makes sense. Trumpists are thrilled with Kayleigh McEnany. They're gleefully cheering how she's been owning the media with these huge alpha takedowns of the biased fake news press corps. It is literal nonsense, which only calls into question her own judgment if she fell for supposedly fake headlines. And the Trumpists love it. They regularly tweet about how Kayleigh McEnany is just crushing these reporters during press briefings. Now, on principle, this explanation is absurd. But of course, it's not just about headlines. She came up with these opinions on her own. It's not that she was repeating things. Like, I know you all know that it's a dumb explanation, but she was coming up with stuff on her own that was anti-Trump. I'll give you an example. On August 6th of 2015, she tweeted, "Everyone seems to have a plan except Trump," live during a Republican primary debate. She didn't get that from CNN. That's her opinion. She came up with that. She volunteered it. So do I think for a second that Kayleigh McEnany truly believes Trump is the best president in history? I don't believe it for a second. Do I think she's willing to say anything at any time in order to justify her own career and try to advance her own interests, which right now includes impressing Donald Trump and having this national platform of press briefings? Of course. And every time she tweets, every time she speaks to the press, that's exactly what she's doing. And then maybe most importantly, is it working? And the answer is, on Trumpists, it is. Trumpists are hugely impressed with her every time she does one of these joke press briefings. Don Jr. retweets it and talks about it. A whole bunch of people, even people that are only sort of tangentially involved in politics that I know, I'm friends with on Facebook and are sort of centrist right, have been posting clips of Kayleigh McEnany and how great and amazing everything she's doing is. It's concerning. It's extremely concerning because She seems to be convincing the exact people that needed to feel like here's someone who can actually hold their own, given that Trump can't during these press briefings. And Kayleigh McEnany is doing it for them. Again, the world is laughing. We on the left think it's absolutely crazy what she's doing, but the people she's trying to impress seem impressed, very much so. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a caller who, well, I'll just let her say it. I don't need to tell you too much about it. Take a listen.
Hey, David, just watched the video about Trump tweeting over 52 times in 1 hour and was very much reminded of my mother-in-law before she was officially diagnosed with dementia would call family members up to 100 times a day, leaving voicemails or talking to them because she literally forgot that she had called us. And part of me in this absolutely worried and this would be horrible, but it really reminds me of that and makes me think that this could possibly be a sign of dementia, that he's not remembering all these tweets that he's given within an hour. And it just really reminds me of that. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So, I mean, of course, you know, I'm not qualified to say anything about a dementia diagnosis, but what you're talking about with memory is interesting. And there's a couple things I would put out there. Number one, there are times when reporters quote Trump's own tweets to him, and he certainly doesn't seem to remember them. His answer doesn't indicate he actually remembers the content of the tweet, but that just may be how Trump answers questions. Okay, that's one thing. There are reports from people inside the White House not authorized to speak about this that say Trump doesn't remember. He just doesn't remember. He doesn't remember conversations he's had with people. He essentially arguing that one of the explanations that maybe is not getting enough attention when Trump appears to be lying or saying that he didn't say something that he's on record saying is that he genuinely has no memory of it. So this is not the first time that such an allegation has been made. On today's bonus show, very exciting, I am going to give you a prepping update. I have a number here in my home studio. I have received via the mail a number of elements of prepping that I've ordered, some which are obviously beneficial, some which I have questions about. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit on today's bonus show. We will also talk about 2,000 former Department of Justice and FBI officials who are calling on William Barr to resign for his handling of the Michael Flynn case. We will talk about murder hornets, so-called, and we will also talk about the Supreme Court appearing as though they are going to give religious employers pretty broad-based ability to discriminate. All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. Get instant access by signing up at joinpacman.com or by making a pledge of at least $5 a month at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. We'll see you on the bonus show or on the live streams or on tomorrow's program. Appreciate you joining me today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode. Just a reminder, today's sponsor, Blue Chew, is giving you your first shipment completely free. All you have to do is pay $5 shipping. Go to bluechew.com and use the promo code DAVID. I've put a link right underneath this video.